All right. Well, hello to our guests. Welcome to our first WYCUP Global Gateway of 2026. I'm Cassandra Schroeder, Director of WYCUP over here at the Worldwide Foundation for Credit Unions. This is our very first event of our 25th anniversary year in 2026. So I am excited to kick it off just with our little group here. So you guys are lucky we have some one-on-one chat time. So do feel free to join us on video. I'm not sure exactly the time it is where you guys are, but we'd be happy to make this a little bit more interactive since it's just an intimate group. Otherwise, like I said, Miriam will go ahead and record this so we can send it over to the rest of our colleagues that weren't able to join us. With that, I'll just do a very quick introduction. This is our 25th anniversary year, and our theme for this year is From Solos to Symphonies, which is meant to celebrate WYCUP's growth over the past 25 years. What started as a scholarship program has grown into a global leadership community, connecting hundreds of emerging leaders from more than 90 countries and helping them gain international perspective. So we're excited to continue to grow in that mission. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick reminder that our application portal for the 2026 WYCUP Scholarship closes in 2 days. So this is your last chance to apply if you are interested in joining us at the World Credit Union Conference in Australia this year in July. So you don't want to miss it. With that, I don't want to take away any more time from you guys with today's guest speaker. So I am honored to introduce Miriam de Dios Woodward, an accomplished executive with over 20 years of leadership experience, and in fact, a 2012 recipient of the WYCUP Scholarship. She's led fintech, regtech, and B2B service companies serving credit unions, insurance, and healthcare. Miriam currently serves on our WFCU board and has an extensive record in driving organizational change, DEI initiatives, and financial inclusion. Before Miriam shares her presentation, we are getting started with a few questions that were submitted by our network. They were selected because they align with today's topic on personal branding and visibility at work. Miriam, many of our young professionals aspire to serve on boards. Can you share your journey and how you approach becoming a WFCU board member?
Yes, and first of all, I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Cassie. Absolutely. Board service has really always been a part of my career journey from the start of my career. Once I learned of board service, it's something I aspired to do. And so I started volunteering early in my career with small nonprofit groups. And those really came about really just networking and connecting with folks. And once they got to know my kind of career aspirations, but also some of my strengths, some of the, at that point, kind of the areas I'd studied, which were marketing and management, business. And those strengths kind of aligned with what the board roles were. Opportunities came up. And so, given that, it's also given me exposure to a variety of different industries, as well as to just the world of board governance. So, particularly with the WFCU board, that was an opportunity that came up. One, just kind of being connected and networking with folks. Somebody asked me as an opening came up for a new board member. They were looking for certain skill sets. They thought that I might have those. Would I be interested, in exploring that opportunity? And I always try to serve on at least a couple boards kind of every year, kind of given the rotation or the terms of those boards. And so that aligned with the capacity that I had and the skill sets that they were looking for that I could bring. And more importantly for me, when I serve on boards, I want to make sure that the organization's mission and my goals align. And so I'm very passionate about the credit union industry. I've been in it for a bit. And so all of those things kind of aligned for me to say yes and to be able to come onto the board. Long answer to a short question.
No, I think that's great. In my own career, I think people are kind of surprised, especially with smaller organizations, at what they think need to be board qualifications. So in
Yes.
my case, I served on a library foundation board for a smaller community that I initially reached out just to see if they had any volunteer opportunities. And like you said, with the specific skill set, in my case was event planning at the time, they said, hey, we really actually need this on our board. And I was quite young at the time, and I thought, well, I don't know anything about being on a board, but they said, you'll learn as you go. We could really use it has really come in handy, having that knowledge moving forward. So definitely encourage people
Yeah.
to look out for those opportunities. Another question we had here. Early in their career, how can young professionals make themselves visible and add value in a way that is noticed and respected?
Yes, big question that we'll actually dive into a lot more here in a couple of minutes. And I've so much to say around this, but I'm going to pick we'll say one way to be more visible and to add value. And I'm going to hone in on communication. Communication is so important, and we may take it for granted a bit, but if you think about in a business, working with people, you have to communicate a lot. And so communicating clearly and effectively is particularly important. That will get you noticed, that will bring visibility to you. And so I stress that because if it's not necessarily, a strength of yours, it is something to work on, and it is very much worth your time to spend cultivating that strength and getting really good at it. There's obviously different facets of communication. Speaking is going to be very important, just as writing is as well. But as you might imagine, visibility, more specifically, also means being in front of folks and being able to convey those ideas clearly and effectively. And there's more that goes into that effectiveness, but I would say that's a top one for sure.
Got it. Our last one here was specific to larger organizations and how difficult it can be to gain visibility in that situation. Any
Mhm.
specific advice for how a young professional can elevate their profile in that setting to prepare for leadership opportunities?
Yes. Again, so many thoughts on this. I do have a couple, and we'll dive into these a little bit more. One, I would say, if you haven't done this, thinking about leadership opportunities and really reflecting on your career goals, talking to your manager about this. I'd say that that's a primary step, right? Your manager should be your partner in this and helping you one, develop those skill sets that maybe you want to hone in more. But two, if they know this, they can also be great advocates for you, right? As different opportunities come up. So one, talking to your manager about those aspirations is extremely important. And then we'll talk a bit more about this, but looking at ways to be helpful and getting things done is so important in a fast-paced world. Organizations are busy, people are busy, but there's always those goals that we're trying to achieve. And so, being a part of getting something done automatically, creates visibility. And I speak from an experience, and some of the folks that I've had as rising stars in my organizations or that I've promoted, they were good at solving problems, getting things done, and being consistent with that. So those would be two key ones.
So thank you for those insights. If anybody here has any specific questions that we didn't get to, like I said, these were submitted during our registration process. But if there's any specific questions you have for her during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. We'd also love to see you guys on camera if you're willing, and we can definitely all have a chat at the end of Miriam's presentation. Hi there, Flora. Good to see you. All right, Miriam, if you wanted to dive deeper into your presentation, we'll move into our Learn section of our Ask, Learn, Lead here, and we'll let you take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cassie. Well, bear with me for 1 minute here. Let me transition to a PowerPoint that I have prepared. And we will hope I get this all right. Okay. Well, give me a thumbs up if that's coming up all right for you. Good.
Looks
All
great.
right. Well, I absolutely love that we're talking about this. Honestly, I wish I would have been able to attend a session on this early on in my career. I ended up learning a lot of this just, through experience and having opportunities to also lead organizations and lead teams. But how great that you are already thinking about this and submitting these questions. I'd say this is a really important topic because, the reality is that when it comes to career growth and development, promotions and career growth opportunities often do go to folks that are visible and not just capable. And again, as I reflect on those, individuals that I've had, the privilege of working with, I've promoted some of those rising stars in past teams. It really has been those individuals who have that combination, right? They're capable, they're performing, but they are also visible. And so that's the big question, right? Like how do we become visible? What are some of those things that we can do? So let's break that down. And more specifically, how can we get noticed by leaders in our organization, right? Whether it's our managers or that executive level, or those that are making those decisions on those promotions and those, next opportunities. Well, here's a list that I've compiled kind of based on what I've seen, and some of this has, impacted me as I've been promoted in past jobs as well. So what leaders notice, I talked about this a little bit in that question, who solves problems, who gets things done. There is a lot to focus on in an organization, right? So many aspects of the business, so many areas. And, you will have your realm of what you're doing with your particular role. So lots of, potential for solving solutions with your particular role, but there's also the broader business. And so, the more that you know about the business, the better as well, because you also better understand what some of the challenges and problems are. So, we're going to notice who solves those problems, as opposed to who's bringing up the problems and maybe not providing those solutions, right? So not only that, but knowing what the problems are is good. But what can you do about them to get those things done? And of course, sometimes we may have that influence and authority to get things done ourselves. Most of the time, you're having to work with others, right, to move things along. So that in and of itself is a topic. Communication, like who's communicating clearly and effectively. And, you will notice this in meetings and one-on-one conversations, right? Who is able to clearly talk about the problem, maybe how they addressed it, the challenges they're encountering, things like resources that you might need to get something done. That effective piece is also important too. Are you communicating to the right audience? When you're talking to your manager, as opposed to talking to a team where you may need something from them or trying to convince, them of something, as opposed to maybe a presentation style where you're providing an update or talking about something that you've done. So, of course, the more experiences you have in those variety of settings, that helps build that communication expertise. And of course, we're going to notice who is able to communicate those ideas clearly and effectively. Who's showing initiative beyond their role? I have worked with folks who, sometimes I have asked to, maybe take on a stretch role, and the reply has been, that's not really in my job description. I can tell you that that's something that you want to avoid, right? So, thinking about those opportunities beyond what you're doing today that really will stretch you. So there should be some learning that you're going to take away from it. And for the organization, it helps create additional impact or move something along quicker, or provide, an opinion, a perspective that, maybe another team doesn't have. So those ways to be proactive and to show that initiative to volunteer for things outside of your role can be noticed, and will be noticed. Who shows judgment? And I should write who shows good judgment and confidence in that good judgment. that's important for decision making, for kind of owning what you own and kind of taking charge of that. For that speaks to observing and having kind of good listening skills. These are important traits that also leaders tend to exhibit. And so again, in your realm of influence, what decisions are you making? What judgment do you have? Are you articulating those things? And do you feel confident, in those opinions that you're sharing? Not to say that, we all make mistakes and, sometimes our judgment can be a bit off, but provided you've done kind of your due diligence, your research, you've made your observations and you're able to confidently, communicate that good judgment, those things are noticed. And so back to, those that are capable, uh, those that are performing, you add these visibility opportunities and that opportunities to become more visible, that leads to new opportunities coming your way. And so, what does this have to do with personal branding? Well, some of those kind of, I guess, things, traits to work on, to do, to exhibit, to be noticed, those become a part of the value that you bring and what people know you for. And so, as we think about a personal brand, that really is your reputation. It's what you're known for doing. It's what you're consistently exhibiting that others are taking notice of. And it's really the image that folks have of you. So another way to think about this is, if you leave a room, it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. And, there could be a variety of things that people say, right? So when you leave the room, is it, well, he or she would be a great person for this opportunity. They're organized. You can count on them, right? They're good with follow through. They're great relationship builders. Fill in the blanks of all of the strengths that you have. Or is it that you leave a room and folks might be hesitant to send an opportunity your way because, maybe you exhibit the opposite of some of these things, not the best at follow through, or, oh, I'm not sure if you can count on them to show up, or they're inconsistent in these areas, as two ways to think about, what folks might say. So again, we all have a brand. We all are known for exhibiting kind of, certain traits and skill sets, and for showing up in certain ways, but not all of us own it. And so here's where some of that, good work comes in to develop some of those areas that maybe we're not as happy with and we want to improve on, or where we've gotten some feedback, right, from managers or leaders, that we could build on these things. So a takeaway, we have to own that personal brand. And so I have just a quick exercise to do to get you thinking about that personal brand. And so I'm going to have you just take a minute to think about these questions. And these are broad questions, so don't spend too much time maybe around specifics, but just think about initially what comes to mind, what comes to your gut. One, what do you want to be known for? And so we'll take a professional setting here, right? Like in a professional setting at your, in your organization with the job that you're doing, what is it that you want to be known for? Two, what impact do you want to have? So, in thinking about what you want to be known for, what you want to do, what might be a bigger picture of, something that you want to move forward or kind of contribute to. So, think about that impact. And then number three, what are three core strengths that people associate with you? And I, I purposefully added this note of, what folks might associate with you. So, of course, we understand what our strengths are, but maybe if you've heard some of these things or someone is giving you this feedback on the strengths that you have, what are a couple of those strengths that you have? So take a minute to answer these, and then we will share a little bit, and I'll hone in on one area here that could turn into a personal development opportunity too. Okay. All right. And as you're answering these, if if we have any brave volunteers, I know it's a smaller group, but I'd love to hear, maybe chime in. What is something that you want to have impact on, and whether it's with your particular job or your organization as a whole, drop that in the chat, and then I will figure out how I can see the chat on my slides here. Oh, here we go.
As well, people are thinking about it. One kind of question that I have, do you ever find that maybe some of the core strengths that people are known for aren't necessarily the ones that they want highlighted and how they navigate that? So in my case, I'm thinking through, I was always told I had really good like customer service, member service skills, and I feel like that kind of siloed me in
Mm,
certain roles for a long time that I kind of had it to navigate around. So
mhm,
at this point, I feel like that brings, positivity really in any role. But
mhm.
that was something I kind of had to navigate that was, what people thought of me for rather than leadership opportunities.
Really great point, Cassie. And that is what I did want to hone in on. Number three. Yes, those core strengths. So that's why this is a good exercise to do to one, compare, what's your list of strengths that you want to be known for, but what are people associating with me? And it probably, I'm not sure kind of what avenue or channel, allowed you to kind of figure out how are people associate, or what are the strengths people are associating me with. But there's great tools out there like kind of 360 reviews, or even just kind of one-on-ones to ask other people, okay, take a step back and knowing what you know about me and how we interact, what are those top three skills? Just having that informal conversation can bring up this. So one, it's knowing, what are people associating with me? And two, if there is a disconnect with where you want to be and what people are saying, I would say, then it's really working on that. So one, is that true, right? Do you agree with that? And is that okay? And in your case, maybe it's not. Maybe you aspire, to have other strengths because maybe there's an additional role that you want to aspire to where it's different than that. Okay, well then what do I, it all comes back to what do I want to do about that? Let's have a plan to start to build that strength and communicating that. So I think that that's a big part of it. One, you'll communicate by what you do and what people see, but also what you're proactively, kind of saying, what you're volunteering for and trying to steer toward, those opportunities. It's not an easy thing to do right away. It takes a little bit of time, right? As you probably learned. But that's a great question and a good opportunity to to start to pivot and figure out and bring that into a personal development, professional kind of development plan, and talk to your manager about it too. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyone
Well,
else want to share? Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I hate to pick on anybody,
Yeah.
but
We
I
we have
think
a small crew, yes. And really, anyone want to share any answer to any of these questions? Oh, awesome. Impact. I aspire to be a youth leader who bridges the generational gap in our cooperative, connecting the wisdom and experience of older generations with the creativity, energy, and fresh perspectives of our youth, maybe through open dialogue and collaboration. Oh, no worries. That's wonderful, and very well thought out. You've really thought about this, and that is some deep and kind of long-term impact that you want to have, and I think that's very aspirational. So I love that. And there's so many, strengths really that would be needed to fulfill that. And so I encourage you, one, if you haven't shared this, with others, start to do that because that's very motivating. And I would imagine, I mean, any cooperative, would want someone with that type of aspiration and that wants to have that impact that connects so much to, a cooperative's mission as well. And so I love that. Very good. Any strengths that folks kind of identified through this exercise that folks are associating with them? And if not, that's okay. This is always a good takeaway exercise to have to, again, start to cultivate and think about like, what's your brand today? And that next step of, how do I want to make any changes to that? Does my personal brand need to be something different depending on, what my goals are and what impact I want to have? All right. Well, thank you for indulging me here in this. Let's move on. All right. So now let's dive a little bit more specifically into, what are some ways that I can be to, affect some of these kind of areas to become more visible at work. And I, I really want to emphasize knowing yourself well, being very self-aware of your strengths, but also your areas of improvement. I'd say, this is something I learned earlier in my career as I was exposed to topics like emotional intelligence, and spending some time doing some personal assessments about, my strengths, but also working with managers that were focused on learning and development, and that gave me feedback on areas that they perceived were, important leadership traits that, they felt that I could work on, and really grow and shine in those areas. So I encourage you to spend some time reflecting on this yourself, first and foremost, right? Know your strengths and know what you're also not good at. We all have different strengths, they're not all the same. And we also have limited time in the day, right, to work on those areas of improvements. But focus in on maybe one or two that align with where you want to be, with the impact that you want to have. And more importantly, as you become a leader, you also want to surround yourself with a wide array of folks that bring in, different backgrounds, skill sets, et cetera, and that can help you, I guess, supplement those areas of improvement. So that's why it's always good to know your baseline and what you're good at, what you're not. Communication. I'll keep stressing this, right? We want to focus on that effective communication. And so what are some specifics around, being effective communicator? Well, we start with confidence. Always be confident. And confidence for me comes from, being prepared, knowing what you're going to be talking about, spending time. We all prepare differently in terms of, maybe presentations or, how we want to have one-on-one conversations with folks. Be prepared. That boosts your confidence. I would say be concise, be brief, because back to, maybe being visible with leadership or executives in your organization, if you want those opportunities, they have limited time in the day. And so be concise, but make sure that you're making your point, that your point is coming across. Um, Early in your career, I know we all want to impress. We all, as professionals, may have kind of the need to over impress. I will tell you, you may do that a few times. It may not be as effective as you think. I would say, what really ends up having an impact is saying things simply, right? Focusing on that point that you want to make, say it simply, kind of put it out there. And typically that tends to resonate more because back to if we're overcomplicating things, then typically that takes longer to explain. You're over explaining, and sometimes you may because of that, kind of lose that moment with whomever you're connecting with. You may lose them, and so say it simply. Avoid that over explaining and apologizing. I've been known to do this myself, and being a female leader too. I think there is a perception, and honestly, I do see it exhibited. We tend to apologize for a lot of things. Sometimes we're not even conscious of it, right? And part of it comes from feeling like maybe we shouldn't have said something or we shouldn't be there. If you find yourself apologizing, and this is where you can get a check from others that you trust or peers, right, to give you some feedback, like how did I do in that meeting? And they might call some of this out. And if they do, try to remind yourself and just practice different language to avoid that apologizing. Contributing is going to go a long way, and you can contribute in many ways. Back to communication, speaking up, and not just speaking up to speak up and to say anything, but speak up with purpose. So that purpose can be to share some sort of an insight. Back to a meeting driven world, we're constantly getting updates. We're constantly talking about, maybe the past. And I can tell you, in some of my leadership experiences, we end up doing that way too much, talking about the past and updating. And so, back to being noticed and being visible at work. If you're sharing insights or if you're, talking about maybe connecting an opportunity to the future or to, let's say, the strategic plan of the organization or strategic goals of the organization, those types of conversations immediately kind of change the dynamic because they're future forward. And I'd say more of those future forward conversations that you can have are great. And it just gets creativity flowing. And especially if you're seeing a lot of kind of monotony with lots of updates and past reflection, that's one simple way. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, something particularly kind of riveting, but just an insight. It could be an insight around, what you're seeing with members today, or a story that you want to share about a member. Again, those kind of different perspectives will, definitely raise that visibility. Also, volunteer for visible work. What does this mean? If we have a tendency to want to be behind the scenes, not noticed, we aren't the ones to volunteer for those presentations or for leading a team meeting. Unfortunately, that's not going to get you that visibility that you're wanting and that we're really talking about. So you have to take those stretch opportunities, volunteer for some of that visible work that, yes, it might be some process work, let's say, but if you know that at the end of that, managers are expecting a brief update at a staff meeting, sign up for that. And if there's a team and you're trying to decide, well, who's going to give the update to the team, volunteer. Yes, it may feel uncomfortable. It always does. And we all have those first experiences of being able, of maybe doing a first presentation. I mean, practice, prepare. And it still may not go as you want, but guess what? Taking that initiative to have volunteered to do that, that's meaningful. And the more that you build on that, the more practice that you have with that, that's what we're talking about here. So volunteer for that visible work, not just extra work, because that extra work, and maybe an example of that, which happened to me personally, often kind of early on, and even in some of my volunteer roles with boards, like I would take um, the position of being the minute taker, right? Because that was an easy thing. It's like, okay, I'll take the minutes, or I will record, the action items. And eventually, if you start doing that, people will always ask you to do that. Well, that's kind of behind the scenes work, right? So yes, it's good to do that every now and again, and to have that experience, but don't get stuck in those things. Look for some of those additional roles to kind of raise your hand where you might be able to speak up and where folks can see you and start to equate kind of different talents with you and different perspectives with you as well. Take time to connect. We do this in a variety of ways. Make sure that you're listening and not always talking. We learn more certainly by listening. And that's a great way to observe others as well, to see other leaders in action, right? What are they saying? And to kind of decipher what's impactful about their words and how can I, do some of the things that they're doing that gets that visibility. Another easy way to connect, acknowledge others' contributions. And elevate others, and that's a great way of one building connection, and you'll find that that's typically also folks will do that with you as well, right? As you acknowledge some of their contributions, if they have opportunities to acknowledge yours, typically that is reciprocated. Communicating with empathy, building relationships. Take time to do this. Oftentimes we are focused on the work, we want to get things done, and some of us, may have a tendency to want to work on those kind of tangible things. Maybe building relationships is a little bit harder. Maybe we're a little bit more hesitant to network, if you will. But it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Having one-on-one conversations with others, with other peers in your organization, with your leadership. I mean, I find that the credit union industry is wonderful, always very giving. Folks are always very open to have conversations with you, to learn more about you, to hear about, some of your aspirations. So if you're intimidated by that, don't be. And once you reach out to someone, hey, I'd love to chat with you for 10 minutes. Maybe I noticed something about the organization, or oh, I heard you speak and I was really captivated by this. I'd love to chat a little bit more about that. That's how you start to build relationships, one small step at a time. And lastly, be consistent. Be consistent in what you do. I mean, show up prepared. I can't advocate enough for, being prepared, doing your homework. If you have a presentation coming up, make sure you know that material well, right? Know more beyond your role too. Know more about, your organization. And, that is also important and can lead to new opportunities. Make sure you follow through. Do what you say you're going to do. That is a big one. And you'd be surprised. That seems easy, but not everybody does this. And back to what leaders notice and the people that leaders notice, they notice who get things done and who follows through on commitments. And so that starts to build a reputation over time. And you want to check on that reputation, right? By asking others, okay, how do you observe me? What are those strengths that you associate with me? Or, if it is maybe a presentation that you've done or some work that you've delivered, give me some input on that. Were there things that I could have done better there? And really take that seriously. Now, we only have so much time in the day. Focus on the things that you want to improve on that really are going to be meaningful to you, and that align with your career goals and your career aspirations. So I know there's a lot here, and hopefully you'll get this PowerPoint to kind of come back to. But these are some ways that I think of, starting to elevate that visibility at work. And the good news is that if you start to do some of these things, these things position you for growth. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want to advance, right, in our careers. We want to grow professionally, personally as well. And so I, want to leave you with this. Don't wait to be chosen. And sometimes we make that assumption that, oh, someone will notice me, someone will advocate for me. Well, I'm telling you, don't wait for that. You be proactive with this. Set that goal, communicate that goal as we've talked about. Ask for those stretch opportunities within the organization. But if there are also, volunteer opportunities outside the organization, such as, volunteering for an organization, those could turn into board roles in the future. And there's all sorts of ways to volunteer. You don't have to necessarily just be on a board. There's committee opportunities. Again, back to, just having an understanding of maybe the organizations around you, which ones connect with what you're interested in, and talking to some of the folks that are a part of that organization. That's what can lead to opportunities. Create opportunities for yourself. Sometimes we might be in positions, and I know I've had this come up in organizations that I've led, where we might be creating a new role. Someone is coming in to fill a brand new role, as an example. Well, the blueprint isn't always set for that role. We may have an idea, right, of the impact we want that role to have, and maybe certain goals that we want with that role. But the processes haven't been created necessarily, or there could be a blank canvas there. So take advantage of those opportunities. And I've worked with folks in capacities where they've loved that. Like they've taken that and they've run with it. They've really, created the position for themselves. And then I've had other folks really struggle with that and want me to define it when I'm giving them the opportunity to define it as maybe their manager. So that's one example of when those opportunities come up, really seize those. Those are great ways for you to shine, for you to be visible, to be able to put a process together, or to find a way to advance the organization, understanding what the business needs are, connecting that with your role. Great opportunities to really create those opportunities for yourself if you're not finding that there's others for you to volunteer at. Get those things done. Mentorship and advocacy, seeking mentorship. It may seem maybe more complicated than it needs to be. And I've had opportunities to have informal mentors as well as formal mentors. And I've learned greatly from both of those opportunities. And if a formal mentorship program doesn't necessarily exist around you, mentorship really is just it starts with networking, but it's building a connection with someone, and it's building a relationship with someone where you're sharing what your aspirations are, and kind of seeking advice on how you navigate, some of those opportunities. Uh, in addition to kind of that advice that helps you, maybe choose different paths, or, better understand the landscape of something, finding those advocates within your organization is also very important. So who are those decision makers? Hopefully you have great relationships with your managers. I think that's the first stop, right? And back to, they need to understand what your goals are, and provide those resources and support to, again, grow those skill sets. But also to bring up your name in rooms where you're not at, right? As they may have and will have more visibility of what the business needs are, or different opportunities to volunteer. If they know that you want some of those and those opportunities come up, an advocate, will be able to bring up your name in those scenarios, and hopefully, kind of volunteer you, or, we've all been sometimes voluntold something, right? Asked to volunteer, but really kind of expected to do it, embrace some of those opportunities, because again, they'll provide some visibility. And in this whole realm of mentorship advocacy, networking is important. Connect with other peers within your organization, outside of your organization. Obviously, young professional groups are great ways to build upon those networks. You learn from others. You're made aware of different opportunities as you connect with others as well. And then you learn from where everybody is kind of in their career, and what are some of those kind of things that are working for you that may also work for me. So always, be thinking about how to position yourself for growth, and don't wait for the opportunity to come to you. So there's lots of things to do, to focus on, that we want to do well and we want to do consistently and more of. What are some things to avoid? I've mentioned a couple of these, but as I was reflecting on some of the mistakes that I've made as well, a few of those are on this list as well. Again, don't wait to be noticed, don't wait to be recognized or invited to speak. Do it. Just, volunteer, even though it might be intimidating. You don't stay quiet. If there's a meeting opportunity, always try to share something. Now, You don't have to have all of the information. You don't have to sound like the smartest person in the room, right? It's sharing a quick insight, it's asking a clarifying question, but make sure that you're always contributing visibly by speaking up. And staying quiet to avoid mistakes. I've made this mistake many times. I'm a perfectionist by nature, right? And as I'm thinking of what to say, there's this, nature in me that wants to get it, completely right before saying it. I've learned you miss opportunities that way. And so there's tricks to kind of overcome this kind of mental, mind frames to have. Just remember, you can share a half-baked idea. And what's helpful to me is to even share that, ooh, this spurred this, and I haven't really thought this all the way through. So help me out, folks, but I did want to share this. Like, that gives yourself kind of permission to share something that may not be fully thought out, but that would be helpful for the team to know. So don't worry about that perfect response. Back to overworking yourself, or working on those things that might just make you busy but not provide those visible opportunities because you want to prove yourself. We all will have some of those tasks to do, right? And those things that aren't our favorite to do, of course. At the same time, we don't want to overwork ourselves if those visibility opportunities aren't coming with that as well. Oversharing without value. So, back to make sure you have a purpose, make sure that you're prepared to share. Being visible only when there's a problem. So essentially, let's say you may like more of the behind the scenes things, but when problems come up, you're the first one to share the problem, but not necessarily to offer the solution. We want to avoid that. If you're going to share the problem, and I always call it, if we want to complain, I want to hear, a possible solution around that. And even better, can you take some initiative to start to work on that problem? Yes. Confusing busyness with impact. We're all busy. It is good to be busy, but let's reflect on, are we working on the right things? Are we advancing, what we need to do for our role for us to do well and perform well in our role? Are we helping advance maybe the mission of the organization, the strategic plan of the organization? So don't confuse that busyness for impact. And it's good to reflect on that every now and again. Am I working on the right things? And sometimes this can be a really good conversation with your manager, right? To make sure that you're on track with really where you need to be performing. Again, assuming that others will advocate for you. Don't assume. Let's make sure that they know. Let's make sure that you're communicating that and that there's alignment with you and your advocate, or, which could be your manager. Thinking confidence is arrogance. I'm guilty of this, and in my mind, for example, when it came to things like sales, I was always like, nope, that, there's a certain personality that kind of goes with sales. In my mind, you have to be overly confident there. And this is just an example, and I thought there's a lot of arrogance associated with something like that. Well, I've learned we're all in sales, right? As a way to think about this. But being confident in your skill set, in your strengths, in your opinion, that is not arrogance. And you will likely, it takes a lot to go over that line of being truly arrogant. And sometimes, as maybe the only ones in a room who are, and we'll talk about this, who are the youngest person in the room, maybe the only female in the room, maybe the only person of color in the room. There's a lot more that goes into our frame of mind in addition to trying to do these things well. Sometimes that can impact our confidence a bit, but I can tell you, even if you boost that confidence up, you will likely not hit that arrogance, line, if you will. So on that note, when you are the youngest person, the newest person, the only one of you in that room, do not let that deter you. And I have learned this, there's still many spaces where I am maybe the only one in a room, even today. And so my mindset has shifted. You are there for a reason. Your perspective is valuable. And you don't need to know everything to add value. And if you observe others in the room, you know that they don't know everything as well. And so just taking a minute to reset that mind frame can be extremely helpful. Lead with preparation and questions. That's a great way to lead. Come with some insight, but you can ask clarifying questions. Again, speak up with purpose, and always, be prepared. Know who's going to be in the room, know about the topic, and jot down a couple questions even ahead of time. So if you forget in the moment, you kind of come back to your list and are able to share something. Use strategic visibility. So here are great ways, speak early in a meeting, even just briefly, even just to share that clarifying question, for example. Other ways to do that, you build on others' ideas as well. So these, again, give you visibility opportunities. Own your space. Back to let's not over apologize. Let's avoid language that makes us appear less confident, such as just, maybe, sorry. Avoid that over apologizing. And sometimes that comes from thinking we need permission for something. You don't. So you can, speak up, share that question, share that insight, and of course, connect with others and seek that mentorship. Others that may be in that situation too, where they've also been the only one in a room because they might be young, they might be of a specific gender, they might be maybe a person of color, etc. All right. Well, that's a lot. Lots of tidbits here, but I want to leave you with this reflection. What do you want to be known for this year? So, kind of positioning yourself for growth. Who needs to see your work more clearly? And what's one action you'll take this month to increase visibility? So, take some time to answer these questions. And I try to do this at the beginning of every year to align with some of my goals for the year. So I'll just leave you with this little exercise to take away and to really spend a bit more time thinking about those ways that you could increase that visibility and work on that leadership path or that career growth path or whatever that might look like for you. All right. Well, we've talked about these takeaways. I know we're close to time, so I will stop and see what questions we have and maybe catch up on the chat here as well.
Thanks so much. So many good takeaways here. Definitely want to leave the last couple minutes if anybody wants to put questions in the chat, or feel free to come off mute as well and ask them directly. This is definitely your time directly with Miriam. I'm actually going to give one little note here and then go ahead and turn off the recording just in case that makes anybody more comfortable if you have very specific scenarios you want to share. But I just wanted to give one note that next month's Ask, Learn, Lead will be February 25th. Our speaker for that session will be Karen Griffo, speaking on building a purpose-driven career in the credit union movement. Karen's been in the movement for over 35 years, including 25 years as CEO of Roswell Community Federal Credit Union, which is a very small credit union out of New Mexico. Actually, in 2024, she served as CEO of 3 different credit unions simultaneously in an effort to help small credit unions in her area. So really excited to chat with her. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.